Okay guys, so we've just had an amazing episode of Game of Thrones. I'm just going to talk about the episode and just go through the key points and the things that we saw in the episode because it was really amazing. Firstly, the thing was like film length in total, so it was about an hour and 20 minutes. Very good, and it just had so many things that were happening in the episode. So we're just going to obviously recap it and go through the best things, or the episode on a whole, and let's just discuss that. So obviously the episode starts with the Unsullied approaching King's Landing, and they obviously go in force, and we see them there, and they're all there obviously being led by Grey Worm. And then following that, we obviously get this great panning shot where we see that it's the whole army in force, and they've obviously all descended on King's Landing. Obviously then we obviously see that we've got Bronn and we have Jaime, and they're obviously discussing the Unsullied being as they are, Unsullied, and not having any penises basically. So that's quite funny where they discuss that, and that's what's the motivation for fighting. So that's pretty funny. Then we have the Dothraki, who also show up in force as well, and it's crazy because they all come steaming in, and obviously we've already seen how fearsome they are in battle in a previous episode. And then we obviously see that they're also coming by sea as well. So we start to see that these guys are literally surrounding King's Landing. And then we cut to seeing that we've got everybody on the boats together. We've got Jon, and we've got the Onion Knight, and we've got Tyrion. And then we obviously cut to the Hound, who's looking and making sure that what they've came to King's Landing to do is still intact. The Walker, just given that. We then cut to Cersei, and this crazy shot where it actually shows her, and she just looks like, oh, she's so unhappy with everything going on. And then obviously the guys, everybody starts approaching it. They start to make the walk towards where this meeting's going to happen between the king I should say, and these queens. And then obviously there's a reunion of sorts. So you've got Bronn and Tyrion, who I haven't seen in each other in a little while. You've also got Podrick, who also has a reunion with Tyrion as well. You've got Brienne, who has a reunion with the Hound after trying to kill him a few seasons ago. So there's all of these reunions and all of these little moments that have happened in different seasons. So everybody starts coming together for whatever reason. They've all kind of been interwoven in this particular part of the story, and it's really cool because there's a lot of small things that are happening, and there's a lot of cool interlinking between characters, and a lot of knowing glances and a lot of knowing tales, and it's all really cool. So as I say, you have all of these reunions. The nice one is where Brienne obviously talks with the Hound, as I say, and she essentially says that she's, to him, that she's okay, and she's at Winterfell, and basically she can handle herself, which is pretty cool as well. And then obviously everybody comes together, this meeting, to discuss Westeros and how things will be going forward. And then we have this scene where we see the Hound. He notices his brother. He goes over and approaches him and looks at him and sees that he's been completely changed, zombified, and whatever else it is. He looks completely different to the mountain that he knew, but it doesn't change his resolve. The standoff is still there, and he basically says to him, essentially that I'm the one who's going to end you. It doesn't matter who else gets involved. It doesn't matter what other people do to you. It doesn't matter how much they try to break you. The one who finishes you off is me, essentially. So that's another great bit of payoff as well, because these two brothers just can't get on. The stories and the scars of everything that's happened in the past still haunts them both, and it will come to a head. I can't wait to see where their fight goes. The Cleganes, as you will, they obviously will have this big brawl, and that will be really epic to see, the Mountain versus the Hound, and see who comes out on top when it's all said and done. And then obviously Daenerys comes in late to the party as always, but she likes to make an entrance. So she comes in on a dragon, and then just casually says, sorry for being late, I got held up. And then obviously they get to the meat of what's happening. Euron tries to obviously interrupt it by being, showing his bravado, saying that he's still got the sister, and that he needs to come and get him. And then he gets silenced, and then just sit there. And then obviously we proceed with it, where Jon obviously shows what's really going on, and obviously says there's a war going on that you guys don't know about. This isn't about men anymore. This isn't about Iron Thrones. This is nothing about that. The Hound then brings out the White Walker, which startles. It's the first time I've ever seen Cersei look scared. Jaime looks scared. Everybody looks scared at the horror of all of these stories that I've always heard about, that I've all thought was fake, that have been fables, are not fables. They're actually real stories, real things that are happening. And fascinated by it. You say what you will, but I think it's just amazing that all of these characters are in this place and this is what happens. And Jon shows that they can be killed by fire and they can be killed by dragon's glass as well. And, you know, there are ways to actually beat the dead. And, you know, in that moment, Cersei looks, as I say, she looked horrified, you know, almost horrified and scared by the fact that these things that she didn't think were real are actually real. So Euron's also afraid by it as well and actually says, I'm out pretty much, you know, I can deal with everything else, send my armies, you know, I'm willing to fight, all of that kind of stuff. But now we're dealing with the dead, that's a step too far. And he finds out they can't swim. And he's like, I'm going back to the Iron Islands where it's all safe, where it's all normal and we won't have any of these problems. You know, when it's all said and done, I'll still survive this war. So they all agree to obviously terms, and just based on the fact that she saw that she actually does agree to a truce, pending one condition, that Jon stays out of it. As King of the North, he doesn't choose a side. He doesn't choose Daenerys and he doesn't choose Cersei. However, Jon being Jon states that he can't do that because he's already declared himself to serve under Daenerys as his one true queen. That doesn't go down very well with Cersei. They end the negotiations and they proceed to obviously leave. Brienne obviously drags Jaime aside and says, based on what you've just seen, you can't let her leave. You have to persuade her that this is more than just bravado. This is more than just Iron Thrones, and that they need to come together and obviously fight together. And then obviously they leave. Everybody seems a bit sore at Jon, for being honest, but his resolve is still what obviously keeps him. He states that if he has to lie, then that there's no honor in lying, basically. And as noble as it is, it seems to have cost them. And Daenerys is also a bit upset because she says everything that they've just went through, the fact that she lost her dragon, will mean nothing if the truce doesn't go ahead. So Tyrion takes it upon himself to go and speak to his sister, and they have a really epic discussion, or an argument if you will, and they seem to hash out so many things that have obviously been not said in the last few seasons, because obviously they haven't had this moment. So, and there's just underlying issues as well. She blames him for the fact that her mother died during childbirth with him, you know, and he's always been seen as the outcast, the one that the father just didn't love, the fact that he killed his father. All of these things get mentioned and obviously brought up in a way that you know that has some sort of resolve, whether that's good or bad, you know. And they play it out so well. The fact that Tyrion has all of this upset and his anger, and the fact that he blames himself for the death of his nieces and nephews because he killed his father. She blames him for that, but ultimately they come to some sort of truce, it seems, when he finds out that she's pregnant. They then come back to the center where it appears that they've agreed to terms and they will work with Jon and Daenerys to fight the army of the dead and the Night King. Then we cut to a scene where we've got Sansa, and Sansa seems to be talking about Arya, and she's talking about her with Littlefinger. And from the scene itself, it seems to be that Littlefinger's trying to portray it that Arya's trying to become the lady in waiting herself and wants Winterfell for herself, and obviously tries to play it out that way. So it's interesting to kind of see how that scene plays out. We cut back to a scene where Theon and Jon are then having to resolve their differences and their issues, and it culminates with Jon forgiving Theon for obviously his past deeds and his past mistakes, and obviously stating that although he's a Greyjoy, he was raised as a Stark, and he should use some of those things and those qualities and take those things on that Ned taught him. And then, you know, there's a nice little scene where he says that is essentially telling him to go out and save your sister, you know, and it's nice for Jon to kind of do that, and they have that moment. And then that's literally what Theon does. He goes to get his army together to say that they are going to save his sister, to which he gets into a fisticuffs with obviously the leader of the rebellion, who states that they're not going to do that. And then he proceeds to try, and there's a big battle and fight that goes on, and then largely Theon seems to be getting bested until the point where he tries to knee Theon, you know, in a place where he doesn't have the bits anymore. And then that's kind of the resolve for Theon to say, well, I'm going to win this fight. And then he proceeds to just beat him up until he actually wins it and gains the respect of all of these members of the Iron Army. And basically, you know, with that resolve, it's like Theon coming back into himself to become the true Theon Greyjoy that we've had. And obviously building that resolve from the conversation that we had with Jon, they go and seems to set out to obviously go and save his sister, having found some sort of redemption and finding himself. So it does look like we'll see those themes play out in the next season, which will be really cool. We then cut back to Sansa, and Sansa looks deep in contemplation, the fact that she's got something to do. We then cut to another scene where it seems that she's brought Arya in for what seems to be a trial. And then the trial seems to be where she's saying all of these crimes that have been, you know, been placed against Arya. And then you've got somebody like Littlefinger who's looking on. And then it turns to the fact that Arya is saying, get on with it. And then Sansa looks towards the direction of Littlefinger. Everybody then looks towards Littlefinger, and he seems shocked at the fact that his name gets called. And then obviously all of these things have been playing out, and all of the stuff that he's been doing behind the scenes seem to get revealed by all of the Starks individually, and they play the scene out again around him, which is really cool. So he then tries to obviously say, Sansa, I've been with you, and, you know, let's just have a word in private. And she doesn't want to hear any of it. Obviously Bran's there, and Bran brings more evidence to that to say that he was behind Ned Stark's betrayal as well, and he held the knife to his throat. And ultimately it culminates with him being killed by Arya and left in a puddle of his own blood. And it's kind of satisfying because all of these schemes, all of these things that he's been doing, you know, obviously he professes his love for the mother, and all of this stuff obviously comes to a head and ultimately leads with the Stark children being the ones to kind of gain the revenge for their parents and their aunt, and also their mother, if you will, as well. So there's a lot of there's a kind of metaphorical thing that's sort of there playing out there, which is kind of cool. And then just seeing them looking over him as he bleeds out. Then we obviously cut back to a scene where we've got Cersei, who reveals that she has no actual intention of siding and wanting to go into, you know, to ally herself with these guys in the war. And Jaime's just not for it, you know. He's seen the army of the dead with his own eyes now. He understands the gravity of the situation, and he's just not prepared to do it. And she's saying, if you leave me, essentially nobody leaves her. So she's willing to kill him. And at one point it looks like she's about to have the Mountain, or Sir Gregor, actually kill him. And, you know, he calls her bluff and he leaves, leaving her behind to kind of sit on an empty throne, if you will, because like he says, you know, it doesn't matter whoever wins, the dead are still coming. And if the dead don't win, then whoever wins that war will ultimately be coming back to come to King's Landing anyway. So it's better they fight in the war and uphold the truce and the alliance that they formed. So he leaves, understanding the gravity of the situation, and it appears that the long night has finally came to King's Landing. And the great scene that we see at the start, where they're holding the debate and the discussion about what's going to happen, you see this area of where they keep the dragons is now been taken over by the long night, and it seems so ominous for things that are going to happen. It was so nice, so bright, so colourful and sunny, and then when we go back to the scene, it's so dark. And then obviously we see King's Landing, and it's now obviously became part of the long night as well. We then cut back to Bran, and Bran actually reveals to Sam Tarly, who has just came obviously, and you know that they have all the pieces and they put them together themselves, the fact that they need to tell Jon the truth about his parentage. And obviously Bran reveals parts of the tale to him, and then Sam informs him of the real thing, that it wasn't out of wedlock, and that in fact Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyria Stark were actually married, meaning that all of this combination that Ned Stark obviously took him on, you know, and then obviously he is Aeon Targaryen, the one true heir to the Iron Throne. And you see this all sort of play out with intercut with the fact that Jon is now getting with Daenerys. And then there's this very kind of ominous scene where you see Tyrion looking on, and I'm not quite sure what he's looking at or what way he's looking at, it, but it's very ominous, and maybe that will play it and we'll have more as to why he's looking like that, and the fact that they are now, I'm touching over it, but the fact that Jon and Daenerys seem to have now formed a relationship with each other, and it's been hinted at through the last couple of episodes anyway, but finally this is the episode where that happens. We then cut back to a scene where we see the two Stark girls having reconciled, having done what they've done with Littlefinger, and understanding that it's not about the lone wolf, but the pack needs to be together strong. And I love that kind of analogy that they understand now, and it's good to see, as I was saying in the previous episode, that all you want is that these Starks to come together. It's what their family would have wanted, is that they all stay strong, and the idea that they are the wolves, they work better together, and that's really cool to have seen them all come together in this episode and obviously do what they need to do on behalf of their family. We then obviously have another scene where we see Bran, and Bran's obviously walking and looking at what's going on with the Night King and all of that stuff, and then we go and we see Tormund, who's at Eastwatch, and obviously he's looking out and then sees that the army of the dead have now made their way to the wall, and it all culminates with the Night King, who now has one of the dragons absolutely laying waste to the wall itself. And actually this thing that stood there for thousands of years is actually destroyed by the undead dragon. And the cool thing about the dragon is that the dragon spits flames, but it's blue flame, obviously going in line with the fact that it's part of the dead now. And then obviously the wall comes down. We don't know the fate of what happens with Tormund or any of these other guys who were there, but now the stage is set for what will happen with the final season, and the fact that the army of the dead now have full reign into Westeros. They're there. There's nothing to stop them now. They would have probably had a bit of trouble had the wall stayed up, obviously, because the fight would have stayed at the wall for a bit, but now they are making their march. The true war in Game of Thrones is about to begin, and what a point to end it. And obviously it was very thematic, very film-like, and I can't wait to see what happens with this. Everything about this episode was great. There was so many reveals, so many reunions, so many things that are going to play out, and obviously we still don't know where things are actually going to go and who will actually survive the Great War, as they're calling it. But man, are we interested in what's going to happen. Give me your thoughts, guys. Let me know what you think, because this was just another amazing episode and I can't wait to see where it goes.